Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most astonishing, literally mind-boggling stories of human resilience ever recorded. We're going to examine how a group of stranded individuals managed to survive what was, for all intents and purposes, the absolute unsurvivable. It's a historical saga packed with shipwrecks, unthinkable betrayal, and a level of human adaptation against all odds that is just incredible. But first, I want you to really picture this for a second. Imagine being trapped on a tiny, uninhabited stretch of sand right in the middle of the ocean. There are no trees, zero natural shelters. There is absolutely no apparent means of survival. How long do you honestly think you could last? A few days? Maybe a few weeks if you were incredibly lucky? Keep that in the back of your mind as we get into this.
7 meters. That is it. That is the absolute highest point of elevation on Tromelin Island, which is situated roughly 450 kilometers off the coast of Madagascar. This place consists of just 200 acres of sparse grass, a few bushes, and these brutal, relentless winds that literally stop any trees from growing. Even with modern tech today, if someone were stranded out there, surviving a few months would be considered nearly impossible. But 265 years ago, a group of people were trapped on this rock not for months, but for 15 long years.
So how did they get there? Well, the disaster actually kicks off in 1761, right in the middle of the 7 Years' War between France and Britain. On July 31st, a French East India Company ship named L'Utile leaves France with 142 men. The ship stops in Madagascar, where Captain Jean de Lafargue makes a really fateful and completely illegal decision. See, there was a temporary ban on the slave trade by the governor of Mauritius because of the war, but the captain secretly buys 160 Malagasy men, women, and children anyway, hoping to sell them for a massive profit. Rushing to reach Mauritius before getting caught, the captain uses two conflicting maps, and instead of playing it safe and waiting for daylight, he sails blindly into the pitch-black night. The result? Total catastrophe. The ship violently smashes into a coral reef off what was then called the Isle of Sand.
The impact was just devastating. The ship's hull broke apart. According to the logkeeper, a guy named Hilarion, about 20 crew members drowned in the absolute chaos of it all. Now, the 160 slaves had been locked down in the cargo hold. Tragically, many were trapped as the ship went down, but as that hold started to break apart, some actually managed to escape. When the dust finally settled, two very distinct groups had washed up on that desolate shore: 122 French crew members and roughly 80 to 90 Malagasy slaves.
Right, so now you've got over 200 people stranded on a tiny, remote rock. It's 450 kilometers to Madagascar, 430 kilometers to Mauritius, and their ship is completely gone. And the massive inequality that existed on the ship? It immediately transferred onto the land. The French crew managed to salvage what little drinking water they could find in bottles, but they hoarded it entirely for themselves. Because of this incredibly cruel reality, a tragic 1/3 of those surviving slaves died of dehydration right there on the shore. It wasn't until a full week later that both groups finally realized they had to collaborate to dig a well, and they finally secured a fragile water source.
So they obviously needed a way off this island, and a plan was formed. The captain had pretty much lost his mind from the stress and the fear of getting punished for his illegal cargo, so First Officer Barthélemy Castellan du Vernet stepped up and took charge. They decided, okay, we're going to build a new ship from the wreckage. But here is a crucial detail. The slaves performed the vast majority of the grueling, back-breaking manual labor required for the construction. Meanwhile, a lot of the French crew opted for the far easier task of just hunting seabirds for food. But despite this, the slaves' immense physical contribution meant a new sailing ship, which they named the Providence, was completed in just 2 months.
But here's the devastating catch. The Providence was small. It could not hold everyone. And this brings us to a moment of just unimaginable betrayal. All 122 French crew members boarded that newly built ship and sailed away. They completely abandoned the approximately 60 remaining Malagasy slaves, the very same people who had just broken their backs laboring to build the escape vessel. The crew left them behind with nothing but a hollow promise that they would, eventually, send a rescue ship back for them.
From this point on, the story basically splits into two totally different realities. On one side, you have First Officer Barthélemy, who, to his credit, genuinely wanted to save the people he left behind. The crew reached Madagascar and eventually Mauritius, but Barthélemy immediately slammed into a wall of political red tape. On the flip side, back on the island, a grim reality was setting in for those abandoned slaves. A whole year passed, and it became terrifyingly clear that the promise was a lie. No one was coming back for them.
Which brings us to our next section, 15 years of struggle.
Facing total abandonment, you might think they just gave up, right? But they didn't. To stay alive, they had to absolutely master this incredibly hostile environment. And their ingenuity here is just a testament to human survival. They caught seabirds, fish, and sea turtles to eat. But what about fire? Remember, no trees on the island means no wood. Well, ingeniously, they figured out how to use the fat from the sea turtles as a highly effective fuel to keep their fires burning 24/7. They used old pots left behind by the crew to cook meals collectively in a hand-built community oven. And when their original clothes finally wore out, they meticulously wove protective clothing entirely out of seabird feathers.
I mean, they literally utilized every single resource this tiny rock had to offer.
And to survive year after year? Check out this number, 1.5 meters. In 2008, a French naval researcher named Max Guéraud actually went and conducted an archaeological survey of the island. He discovered that to survive the devastating cyclones that regularly ripped through that region, the survivors built small, highly fortified houses out of coral blocks. And the walls? They were a massive 1.5 meters thick. They quite literally built a fortress just to endure the decades.
Yet look, despite all that brilliant problem-solving and survival mechanics, the toll of time in that brutal environment was heavy. The majority of the 60 abandoned slaves perished within just the first 5 years. Desperation got so intense that at one point, 18 of the survivors actually attempted to escape on a makeshift wooden raft. Tragically, that raft vanished into the vast ocean. We know for a fact they never reached Madagascar. Those who were left behind had literally no choice but to continue adapting, taking it day by grueling day.
So, you might be wondering what the heck was happening off the island? Why wasn't anyone coming to get them? Well, the rescue faced a massive roadblock, and his name was Governor Antoine Marie over in Mauritius. First Officer Barthélemy repeatedly begged for a ship, but the governor just flat out refused. He basically argued that because of the ongoing wars with the British, ships were way too scarce to risk on a rescue mission. Barthélemy even tried to divert a supply ship to the island himself, but the sudden appearance of the British Royal Navy totally ruined the plan. Completely defeated, Barthélemy had to return to France, but he never gave up, relentlessly continuing a letter-writing campaign demanding a rescue.
Fast forward to 1771. The survivors had been stranded for 10 agonizing years at this point, and Barthélemy is still over in France writing letters. The turning point finally came when Governor Antoine Marie died. A new, much more sympathetic governor took over. Responding to the years of ongoing pressure, he finally gave the order. On November 29, 1776, a small rescue ship named La Dauphine was officially dispatched under the command of Captain Jacques-Marie Tromelin.
Get ready for this. When Captain Tromelin finally dropped anchor off the coast of that barren sandbar and made his way up to the shore, he found a scene that almost defies belief. After 15 agonizing years, only 8 survivors remained alive out of the original 60. 7 of them were women, and remarkably, held safely in the arms of one of those women was an 8-month-old baby boy.
The conclusion to this harrowing saga brings a small measure of justice, though honestly their survival itself is the true monumental victory here. Captain Tromelin brought the 7 women and the infant safely back to Mauritius. There, the new governor officially declared them all free. That 8-month-old baby boy was baptized and given the name Moses, and as for the island where they endured so much, it was eventually renamed in honor of the captain who finally came for them, Tromelin Island. Even today, the island remains a French territory, housing a little weather station occasionally visited by scientists, but the echoes of what happened there, they definitely remain.
So it leaves us with a pretty heavy question. When faced with total abandonment, what are the true limits of human adaptation? This 15-year struggle is a raw, profound historical testament to the incredible resilience of both the human mind and the human body. No matter how impossible the circumstances seemed, they found a way to survive. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this remarkable piece of history. Take a moment to really think about that level of endurance, and I'll see you in the next explainer.